Move aside, black lady, unless you want this door landing on top of you. Lieutenant Mark Kane slammed the head of a steel sledgehammer against the reinforced safe room door, then shoved Maya Cole backward so hard she stumbled into a bookshelf. Family photographs crashed onto the hardwood floor. He laughed as his officers watched. You really thought anyone would believe a lonely black woman living in this old house had something worth protecting? Maya straightened herself, breathing slowly. That room is protected by law, she said. Don't do this. Kane rolled his eyes and snatched the framed photograph from her hands before throwing it across the hallway. Glass exploded everywhere. Oh, please. You're just another paranoid black widow pretending she's important. The officers burst into laughter. Then Kane lifted the hammer one last time. And after today, he sneered, this whole neighborhood will remember you as the crazy old woman who thought she could tell the police what to do. The final lock shattered. Officers stormed into the safe room, smashing display cases, kicking carefully labeled storage boxes across the concrete floor, and tossing decades of memories aside like garbage. One deputy picked up a worn black case stamped with a faded federal seal. Lieutenant, should I keep this? Kane didn't even look. Break it. It's worthless. The case struck the floor and burst open. A weathered badge slid silently across the room. 3 dusty letters caught the light. FBI. If you think this story is about an ordinary woman, stay with us, because everything is about to change. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and what your local time is in the comments. And if stories about justice, courage, and unforgettable reveals are your kind of stories, subscribe and join us for what comes next. Glad You're Here Traveling reminds us that kindness doesn't need a common language to be understood. 3 days earlier, Maya Cole's home had been the quietest house on Magnolia Street. Every morning began the same way. She watered the small vegetable garden her late husband had built with his own hands, waved to neighbors walking their dogs, and enjoyed a cup of coffee on the front porch before sunrise. At 46, Maya had settled into a peaceful life that most people mistook for ordinary. She rarely spoke about her past. She never boasted about her accomplishments. To the neighborhood, she was simply the kind black woman who always helped elderly. Neighbors carry groceries and never forgot anyone's birthday. Only Maya knew that peace was something she had fought her entire life to earn. Across Atlanta, however, Magnolia Street had become the latest target of Carter Development Group, a billion-dollar real estate company determined to replace the aging neighborhood with luxury condominiums. One by one, homeowners accepted generous offers and moved away. Those who refused soon discovered that life became strangely difficult. Code inspectors appeared without warning. Utility companies suddenly reported mysterious violations. Anonymous complaints flooded city offices. And whenever residents pushed back, Lieutenant Mark Kane somehow arrived first. Standing beside a black police SUV, Kane watched another family load boxes into a moving truck. See, he said to one of the developers beside him, pressure works better than paperwork. The developer smiled. Only one house left. Kane looked across the street. Maya's house. I'll handle her. That afternoon, Kane knocked on Maya's front door, with 2 uniformed officers standing behind him. Maya opened the door without hesitation. Good afternoon, Lieutenant. Kane held out a folder. Carter Development is willing to increase its offer by another $100,000. I already answered. You should reconsider. My answer hasn't changed. Kane forced a smile that never reached his eyes. You know, people who refuse to cooperate usually end up regretting it. Maya calmly folded her arms. I've learned that fear is a terrible reason to make decisions. For a brief moment, Kane's expression hardened. You think you're smarter than everyone else? No. Maya replied evenly. I simply know when someone is trying to bully me. One officer snorted, trying to hide a laugh. Kane stepped closer until only inches separated them. Listen carefully. This neighborhood is changing, whether you like it or not. Maya didn't move. My husband built this house. So, he died believing it would stay in our family. Kane shrugged. So dead people don't own property. The words hung in the air like poison. Several neighbors watering their lawns froze where they stood. Maya lowered her eyes for just a second, swallowing the grief that never truly disappeared. Then she looked directly back at him. You should leave, Kane smirked. I'll be back. As the police vehicles drove away, an elderly neighbor hurried across the street. Maya, are you all right? She smiled softly. I've survived worse. The answer puzzled everyone who heard it. That evening, Maya walked quietly through the hidden safe room beneath her house. Unlike an ordinary panic room, everything inside was perfectly organized. Rows of fireproof cabinets lined the walls. Encrypted hard drives rested inside locked drawers. Old operation journals sat beside neatly labeled evidence boxes. Family photographs shared space with medals, challenge coins, and dozens of sealed files. She paused in front of a faded wooden box. Inside lay a silver wedding ring, her husband's handwritten letters, and a worn leather badge wallet she hadn't opened in years. Her fingers rested on it for only a moment before she closed the lid again. Not yet, she whispered. Upstairs, security monitors displayed every angle around her property. She noticed something unusual. A dark sedan had driven past her house 3 times in less than 20 minutes. The license plate couldn't be seen clearly. But the driver wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at her home. Maya quietly saved the footage onto a backup server. Across town, Kane sat inside a private meeting room with executives from Carter Development. One executive pushed architectural drawings across the table. We're already behind schedule. Kane crossed his arms. She'll leave. How? I'll make sure she has no choice. The room fell silent. Finally, another executive leaned forward. No unnecessary headlines. Kane smiled coldly. There won't be. The following morning, Maya found a bright orange notice taped to her front door. Property Inspection Order. No agency logo. No official department seal. Only a printed signature. She studied it for several seconds before removing the paper. Something wasn't right. The formatting looked wrong. The case number contained too many digits. And the signature. It didn't match any city official she recognized. Most homeowners would have panicked. Maya simply walked back inside, opened a notebook, and wrote down the exact time the notice had appeared. Then she photographed it from every angle before placing it inside a plastic evidence sleeve. Outside, hidden behind tinted windows half a block away, Mark Kane watched through binoculars. He expected fear. Instead, he saw something that unsettled him. Maya wasn't frightened. She was documenting everything. For the first time, Kane felt a flicker of uncertainty. He didn't know why, but instinct told him this quiet black woman wasn't reacting like any victim he had ever intimidated. Unfortunately for him, he ignored that instinct. By sunrise the next morning, 6 patrol vehicles were already turning onto Magnolia Street, carrying a document Kane proudly claimed was a legal search warrant. The neighbors gathered behind their curtains, unaware they were about to witness the beginning of a confrontation that would shake far more than a single neighborhood. At exactly 7:12. The following morning, Magnolia Street woke to the sound of engines instead of birds. 6 police cruisers rolled slowly into the neighborhood, followed by an unmarked black SUV. Red and blue lights flashed across quiet front yards as curious neighbors stepped onto their porches. Maya had already been awake. She calmly opened the curtains, glanced outside, and exhaled. So, you came earlier than I expected. A firm knock echoed through the front door. Before she could reach it, another knock came harder this time. Then another. "Police!" a voice shouted. "Open the door immediately!" Maya unlocked the door herself. Lieutenant Mark Kane stood at the entrance holding several papers with an arrogant smile. "We have a search warrant." She didn't step aside. "I'd like to read it." Kane thrust the document toward her. "You can read it after we're inside." "No," Maya replied calmly. "I'll read it first." His smile disappeared. "You don't get to tell us how this works. I have every legal right to verify the warrant before anyone enters my home." Kane leaned closer. "You've watched too many crime shows." Without warning, he pushed the door open with his shoulder. The force knocked Maya backward several steps. Two officers immediately crossed the threshold. "This is an illegal entry," Maya said firmly. "Everyone here is being recorded." One deputy looked around. "I don't see any cameras." Kane smirked. "Neither do I." He reached toward the hallway wall and ripped a visible security camera from its mount. The device crashed onto the hardwood floor before he crushed it beneath his boot. "There," he said with a grin. "Problem solved." Several officers laughed. Outside neighbors watched in disbelief. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman from across the street, whispered to another resident. "They're treating her like a criminal." One younger neighbor pulled out his phone to record. An officer immediately pointed at him. "Back up." "I'm standing on my own property." "Back up anyway." Oh, reluctantly, he lowered his phone but continued watching. Inside the house, officers opened cabinets, emptied drawers, and overturned furniture with increasing aggression. Kitchen utensils clattered across the floor. Bookshelves were pulled apart. Closets were emptied into piles. One officer ripped open sealed boxes marked "personal." Another sliced through family photo albums with a utility knife while searching for hidden compartments. Maya remained remarkably composed. She followed every movement without interfering. She simply observed. Every drawer, every broken object, every face. Kane noticed. "Aren't you going to cry?" "No." "Aren't you angry?" "I am." "You hide it well." "I learned a long time ago that people reveal more about themselves when they think they've already won." For the first time that morning, Kane hesitated. Only for a second. Then one of the deputies called from the hallway. Lieutenant Kane walked over. "What? You need to see this." Hidden behind a large bookcase stood a reinforced steel door unlike anything else in the house. The frame had been built directly into the foundation. Electronic keypad, biometric scanner, mechanical backup lock. The room looked more like a federal vault than part of a suburban home. Kane's eyes widened. "What the hell is this?" Maya answered quietly. "My private safe room." "You have a bunker." "I have a secure room." "For what?" "My personal property." Kane walked around the entrance, examining the heavy steel construction. One deputy whistled. "That door must cost more than my house." Another officer laughed. "See, I told you she was hiding something." Kane slowly turned toward Maya. "Open it." "No," his voice sharpened. "I said open it." "I know, it isn't listed anywhere in your warrant." He unfolded the document again. "It authorizes a search of the premises. It does not authorize you to destroy reinforced structures or force entry into secured private storage without probable cause." Kane folded the warrant. "You sound like a lawyer." "No." "Then stop pretending." "I'm simply reading the law." The silence lasted only a moment. Then Kane snapped, Bring the breaching tools! One deputy hesitated. Lieutenant, shouldn't we call the judge before forcing entry? Kane shot him a furious look. Did I ask for legal advice? No, sir. Then get the tools. As the deputy hurried outside, another officer quietly approached Maya. His name tag read, Evan Ross. Unlike the others, he looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, he said softly, making sure Kane couldn't hear, if there's anything fragile in there. There is. Why, you may want to tell him. I already have. Evan swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Maya studied his face for a moment. You still know the difference between authority and abuse. Before Evan could respond, Kane shouted across the hallway. Ross? Yes, sir. Quit chatting and help. Minutes later, 2 officers wheeled in a hydraulic spreader, while another carried a heavy steel sledgehammer. The neighbors gasped from across the street. Mrs. Henderson covered her mouth. They're actually going to break it down. Maya stepped between the officers and the safe room door. If you destroy this room without lawful authority, she said clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear, every person participating will be personally responsible. Kane laughed so loudly it echoed through the hallway. You still don't understand. He pointed directly at Maya. Nobody is going to believe a quiet black woman over 6 police officers. Several deputies chuckled nervously, but Evan didn't. Neither did the youngest officer standing near the back. Something about Maya's confidence made them uneasy. She wasn't begging. She wasn't bargaining. She wasn't frightened. She looked disappointed. Kane grabbed the sledgehammer himself. Move. Maya didn't. 2 officers seized her by the arms and pulled her several feet away. She never struggled. She simply watched. The first strike exploded against the steel door with a deafening clang. The impact echoed through the entire house. The second strike dented the outer panel. The third loosened one of the locking brackets. As sparks filled the hallway, Kane wiped sweat from his forehead and smiled. Whatever you're hiding, he raised the hammer once more. Belongs to me now. Behind him, unnoticed by every officer in the room, Evan discreetly activated the continuous recording mode on his body camera. At almost the same moment, deep beneath the house, a hidden backup surveillance system completely independent of the cameras Kane had destroyed silently detected the forced breach. A tiny green indicator light blinked once. Then all recorded footage began uploading automatically to a secure off-site server. No one inside the house saw it happen, and none of them realized that every word, every blow, and every violation was now being preserved beyond anyone's reach. The fourth strike tore through the final locking bracket. With a long, metallic groan, the reinforced door slowly swung inward. Lieutenant Mark Kane smiled triumphantly. I told you, he said, looking back at Maya. Every lock has a key. Mine just happens to be a hammer. 2 officers rushed inside before the dust had even settled. Flashlights swept across rows of steel cabinets, neatly labeled evidence boxes, shelves of carefully preserved binders, and several locked cases stacked with military precision. The room was unlike anything they had expected. Oh, there has to be cash, one deputy muttered. Or gold, another replied. Instead, they found decades of organized records, photographs, old journals, hard drives, challenge coins, awards, handwritten notebooks. Kane frowned. What kind of person keeps paperwork like this? The kind who values the truth, Maya answered quietly. He ignored her. Search everything. The room instantly became a storm of destruction. Cabinet drawers were ripped from their rails. Storage bins crashed onto the concrete floor. Plastic evidence sleeves burst open beneath heavy boots. One officer swept an entire shelf clean with his forearm. sending dozens of carefully labeled folders scattering across the room like fallen leaves. Another smashed a locked display case with the butt of his rifle. Inside rested military challenge coins, commendation plaques, and several folded American flags. "Just souvenirs," he scoffed before kicking them aside. Outside the safe room, Mrs. Henderson wiped away tears as she watched through the open front door. Those belonged to her husband. A neighbor beside her shook his head. "They're destroying memories." Inside, Maya said nothing. Her silence unsettled Evan Ross more than any argument could have. He watched another deputy pick up a wooden shadow box containing medals and photographs of a smiling couple. Without hesitation, the deputy dumped everything onto the floor. The glass shattered. A wedding photograph landed face down. Evan instinctively bent to pick it up. "Leave it," Kane barked. "It's evidence." Evan looked at the broken frame. "It looks personal." "I said leave it." Reluctantly, he stepped back. His stomach tightened. This no longer resembled a lawful search. It looked like revenge. Meanwhile, Kane moved toward the largest steel cabinet in the room. "Open it." "It isn't locked," Maya replied. He pulled the doors apart. Inside were dozens of numbered archive boxes. One caught his attention immediately. Case files. He ripped it from the shelf. Documents spilled across the floor. Most contained newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and investigation timelines. Kane skimmed a page. Nothing made sense. "This is useless." He threw the entire box aside. Nearby, another officer held up a black external hard drive. "Found electronics." Kane's eyes lit up. Finally. He snatched it away. "This is what we've been looking for." Maya looked directly at the drive, for the first time that morning. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. It lasted less than a second. No one noticed, except Evan. He looked from Maya to the hard drive, then back again. Something wasn't right. If that drive were truly important, why had she smiled? Kane slipped the device into an evidence bag. "Bag it." "Yes, Lieutenant." Deep inside the safe room, hidden behind an ordinary-looking electrical panel, another encrypted storage system remained untouched, exactly where Maya had intended it to remain. The seized hard drive contained old family videos, scanned tax records, and intentionally duplicated public documents. Nothing more. The real archive had never been stored where an obvious search would find it. As officers continued tearing through the room, one deputy accidentally knocked over a small leather wallet. It slid beneath Evan's boot. He picked it up automatically. Inside was an old identification holder. The photograph was younger. The name read Maya Cole below it. Most of the lettering had faded with age. Only one word remained clearly visible. Special Agent Evan's heartbeat quickened. He glanced toward Maya. She met his eyes but said nothing. Before he could examine it further, Kane snatched the wallet from his hand. "What is it?" "Just an old ID." Kane barely looked. "Fake." He tossed it onto a pile of broken frames. The wallet landed open. For a brief moment, a tarnished metallic badge became visible beneath the leather flap. Evan caught only part of the engraving before another officer stepped in front of him. He couldn't make out the agency, but he knew one thing. That wasn't fake. Outside, Kane's phone vibrated. He answered impatiently. "We're almost done." A voice on the other end asked something. "No." Kane replied confidently. "She has nothing." He ended the call and looked around the devastated room. Furniture overturned. Family memories destroyed. Cabinets emptied. Boxes ripped apart. Satisfied, he smiled. "I expected a criminal mastermind," Instead, he turned toward Maya with open contempt. "Looks like you're just an old woman who wasted a fortune building a panic room." Maya calmly looked around the wreckage. "No." "What? You didn't destroy my safe room today." Kane laughed. You destroyed your own future." For the first time since entering the house, Kane felt something he refused to admit. Unease. There was no panic in Maya's voice, no desperation, no pleading, only certainty. As officers began carrying seized boxes toward the front door, Evan quietly activated the review screen on his body camera. He replayed the last few minutes. There, frozen in one frame, was the leather identification wallet before Kane had grabbed it. Evan zoomed in. The worn badge beneath the flap became slightly clearer. 3 letters slowly emerged from the blurred image. F. B. I. His breathing stopped. He looked toward Maya again. She stood silently in the ruined hallway, surrounded by shattered memories. Yet somehow she appeared calmer than anyone else in the house. Evan suddenly realized one terrifying possibility. The woman Lieutenant Mark Kane had spent the entire morning humiliating might not have been an ordinary homeowner at all. By late afternoon, Magnolia Street no longer looked like a peaceful neighborhood. Yellow police tape fluttered in the breeze while officers carried box after box from Maya Cole's home. Curious residents watched from behind their fences, whispering to one another. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others quietly recorded what they could before being ordered to stop. Lieutenant Mark Kane walked out carrying the black evidence bag that held the hard drive he believed would expose Maya's secret. He lifted it slightly with a smug grin. "Looks like we finally found what she was hiding." A local television van pulled onto the street almost on cue. Kane smiled even wider. Perfect timing. Within minutes, a reporter stood several yards away, microphone in hand. "Lieutenant Kane, neighbors say officers caused extensive damage during today's search. Can you comment?" Kane didn't hesitate. "The operation was conducted under a lawful warrant. We believe we recovered evidence connected to an ongoing investigation." Mrs. Cole chose not to cooperate, forcing officers to take necessary action. The words spread through the crowd like poison. Several people looked toward Maya with uncertainty. Had they misjudged her? Maya stood silently on her front porch, looking over the shattered remains of her front door. Her expression never changed. Reporters turned their cameras toward her. "Mrs. Cole, did police find anything illegal inside your home? Are you under investigation? Why did you build a reinforced safe room?" She answered only once. The truth doesn't become smaller simply because someone speaks louder than it." Then she walked back inside. Kane scoffed. "She's finished." But inside the ruined house, Maya wasn't thinking about the reporters. She carefully lifted the broken wedding photograph from the hallway floor. The cracked glass reflected the afternoon sunlight. She brushed away tiny shards before gently removing the damaged picture. Her husband Daniel smiled back at her from another lifetime. "I told you I'd protect this home," she whispered. The photograph joined several other precious items inside a small canvas bag. Everything else could be replaced. Those memories could not. Meanwhile, Evan Ross sat alone in his patrol car at the end of the street. He replayed his body camera footage again and again. Every time he paused on the old identification wallet, every time he enlarged the image, each frame revealed a little more. Special agent. The faded badge. The unmistakable outline of federal credentials. He leaned back in his seat. No. His academy instructors had repeated one lesson more than any other. If something doesn't feel lawful, slow down. Ask questions. Protect the Constitution before protecting your career. Today they had done the opposite. His radio crackled. "Ross, Go ahead. Lieutenant wants everyone back at headquarters. I'm on my way. Before starting the engine, Evan quietly copied the entire body camera recording onto an encrypted flash drive he kept in his glove compartment. He had never done that before. Something inside him refused to let the footage disappear. Across town, inside Carter Development's executive office, Mark Kane placed the seized hard drive onto a polished conference table. There. The company's CEO smiled. Excellent. She won't be a problem anymore. One executive connected the drive to a laptop. Folders immediately appeared: family photos, tax returns, home insurance, garden plans, vacation pictures. Silence filled the room. The CEO frowned. Where are the documents? Kane stared at the screen. There should be more. Another folder opened. Holiday videos, recipes, medical records. Nothing else. The CEO slowly turned toward him. You destroyed an entire house. For this. Kane's jaw tightened. She switched the drives. Can you prove it? No. The executive slammed the laptop shut. I don't care what you have to do. He pointed directly at Kane. Get that property. Kane nodded once. I will. Back at Maya's house, volunteers from the neighborhood quietly arrived carrying toolboxes, bottled water, plywood, and cleaning supplies. Mrs. Henderson was the first to step onto the porch. You shouldn't have to clean this alone. One by one, more neighbors joined her. A retired carpenter rehung the damaged front door. A college student swept broken glass from the hallway. Two teenagers carefully gathered scattered books and stacked them in neat piles. No one asked questions. No one demanded explanations. They simply helped. Maya looked around at the people filling her home. Thank you. Mrs. Henderson smiled. You've helped every family on this street. It's our turn. For the first time since the raid, Maya's eyes softened. Kindness still existed, even after cruelty tried to erase it. As evening settled over Magnolia Street, the volunteers slowly returned home. The house remained damaged, but it no longer felt abandoned. Maya descended the narrow staircase leading toward the breached safe room. The heavy steel door still hung crooked on broken hinges. Inside, destruction covered every corner. She walked directly to an electrical panel that officers had ignored because it appeared ordinary. Using a small magnetic key hidden beneath a loose concrete block, she removed the cover. Behind it sat a compact biometric scanner. The green light blinked. Identity verified. A hidden compartment silently slid open. Inside rested a smaller encrypted storage unit untouched. Beside it lay a secure satellite communication device, no larger than a paperback book. Maya picked it up. She hesitated for several seconds. For years, she had promised herself she would never use it again. That chapter of her life was over, or so she had believed. She pressed a single button. The screen illuminated. No dialing, no contact list, only one message. Emergency legacy contact available. Maya closed her eyes, then entered a 6-word authentication phrase from memory. The device transmitted for less than 3 seconds. No voice, no explanation, only an encrypted priority alert. Hundreds of miles away inside a secure federal facility, a dormant notification suddenly appeared on a classified monitoring terminal. A duty officer frowned as the alert flashed across his screen. He immediately stood up. This can't be. He reached for the telephone marked Director's Priority Line. Back in Atlanta, Maya quietly placed the communicator back into its hidden compartment. She locked the panel once more. Outside, Mark Kane believed he had won. Inside Washington, someone had just learned that Maya Cole had finally broken years of silence. And for those who knew exactly who she used to be, That single signal meant only one thing. Something had gone terribly wrong. At 6:18 the next morning, Evan Ross hadn't slept for more than an hour. His laptop illuminated the small apartment as the body camera footage replayed once again. Every frame from the raid had become painfully familiar. Kane shoving Maya, officers smashing family heirlooms, the forced entry, the broken display case. Then Evan paused on the frame that refused to leave his mind. The old leather credential wallet. He enlarged the image again. The resolution blurred. He adjusted the contrast. A little more detail appeared. A shekel agent. His pulse quickened. "Who were you?" he whispered. He froze another frame just before Kane threw the wallet aside. This time, the metal badge beneath the leather flap reflected enough light to reveal part of an eagle crest. Federal. There was no doubt anymore. The woman they had humiliated had once served a federal agency. Whether she still had connections was another question. But Kane had never bothered to ask. At police headquarters, Lieutenant Mark Kane entered the evidence room with visible irritation. "See anything useful yet?" A digital forensics technician shook his head. "We've examined everything seized yesterday. And nothing criminal." Kane's jaw tightened. "What about the hard drive? Family records? The notebooks? Personal journals? The archive boxes? Mostly newspaper clippings and handwritten notes." Kane slammed both palms onto the metal counter. "Run everything again. We already have." "I said again." The technician reluctantly nodded. As Kane stormed out, two detectives exchanged uneasy glances. The warrant had already attracted unwanted attention inside the department. Several supervisors quietly questioned why such overwhelming force had been used against a single homeowner. No one dared confront Kane directly. Not yet. Across town, Maya carefully swept the final shards of broken glass from the safe room floor. The destruction no longer shocked her. Years in federal service had taught her that evidence could be replaced. Integrity could not. She opened another concealed compartment beneath a steel workbench. Unlike the hidden communication device, this compartment contained only a slim waterproof folder. Inside rested newspaper articles spanning nearly 20 years. Most featured blurred photographs of handcuffed officials, corrupt sheriffs, deputies, federal contractors, organized crime figures. On nearly every front page, one name appeared somewhere in the story. Special Agent Maya Cole. She quietly closed the folder. "Some ghosts should stay buried," she murmured. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Henderson stood outside carrying homemade soup. "I figured you might forget to eat." Maya smiled warmly. "You've always known exactly when I needed help." The elderly woman looked around the damaged living room. "I'm sorry they did this." "So am I." After a moment of silence, Mrs. Henderson asked softly, "Have you called your family?" Maya hesitated. "I don't have much family left." "Then call someone who still remembers who you are." Those words lingered long after Mrs. Henderson left. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Washington, D.C., the encrypted emergency signal had already reached a secure conference room. Jack Reed entered carrying a classified tablet. His hair had turned gray since retirement, but his posture remained unmistakably military. A younger analyst looked up. "Sir, do you know Agent Cole?" Jack stopped walking. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he quietly asked, "But what happened? We don't know." "We received her legacy activation." Jack slowly removed his glasses. "She swore she'd never use that code unless every legal option had failed." The room fell silent. An assistant placed several newly retrieved surveillance reports onto the table. Atlanta, Magnolia Street. Unauthorized search. Possible local police misconduct. Jack read only the first page before standing. I'm going. Director approval. I'll get it on the way. Back in Atlanta, Evan made a decision that could end his career. He walked into the digital evidence office carrying his encrypted flash drive. His longtime friend, Officer Daniel Perez, looked up. You look terrible. I need a favor. What kind? If something happens to me. Daniel frowned. Keep this safe. He placed the flash drive on the desk. Daniel stared at it. What's on it? The truth. You planning to explain that? Not yet. Daniel studied his friend's face before quietly locking the drive inside his desk drawer. You've got 24 hours. You'll have your explanation. As Evan turned to leave, he overheard two supervisors speaking in hushed voices nearby. Someone from Internal Affairs called this morning. About Kane. They're asking questions. What triggered it? No idea. Evan kept walking, but hope flickered for the first time since the raid. Someone else had noticed. That afternoon, Kane returned to Magnolia Street without a warrant. This time, he came alone. He stood outside Maya's damaged home, hands in his pockets. When Maya opened the door, he smiled with practiced confidence. I've got one last offer. I'm listening. Sell the house. No. Take the money and walk away. No. You've already lost. Maya looked directly into his eyes. Have I? Kane leaned closer. You don't have anyone coming. Maya's expression remained perfectly calm. That's where you're wrong. For the briefest moment, something crossed Kane's face. Doubt. It disappeared almost instantly. He laughed. I'll believe that when I see it. So will I. He shook his head and walked back toward his SUV. Neither of them noticed the dark sedan parked half a block away. Inside sat Jack Reed. He had arrived in Atlanta less than 20 minutes earlier. From behind tinted windows, he watched Kane drive away before turning his attention to Maya's house. His eyes settled on the shattered front door, the broken windows, the plywood covering damaged frames. He quietly whispered to himself, "What did they do to you?" Maya. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a single number. When the call connected, he spoke only one sentence. I've confirmed the target. Then he looked back at the quiet house. They have no idea who they just declared war on. By the next morning, the story had spread across Atlanta. Every local television station carried the same headline: Homeowner with secret safe room under police investigation. The footage showed shattered furniture and officers carrying sealed evidence boxes from Maya Cole's house. What it didn't show was Lieutenant Mark Kane shoving her. It didn't show the smashed wedding photograph. It didn't show the forced breach of the safe room. And it certainly didn't show the officers laughing while destroying decades of memories. Kane made sure of that. Standing before a row of microphones at police headquarters, he adjusted his uniform and addressed the cameras with practiced confidence. Our officers executed a lawful search warrant based on credible information. Unfortunately, certain individuals are attempting to portray standard police procedures as misconduct. A reporter raised her hand. But were any criminal charges filed against Mrs. Cole? The investigation is ongoing. So, no charges. Kane forced a smile. I can't comment on an active investigation. Another reporter stepped forward. Several neighbors claim excessive force was used. Kane shrugged. People don't always understand what law enforcement officers must do to keep a community safe. Less than a mile away, Maya switched off the television. Silence filled the damaged living room. She wasn't surprised. She had seen public opinion manipulated before. Truth often arrived later than lies. A loud engine outside interrupted her thoughts. She looked through the window. A white pickup truck stopped in front of her house. Two men climbed out carrying official-looking clipboards. One knocked on the damaged front door. City Building Department. Maya opened it cautiously. The older inspector avoided eye contact. We've received an emergency structural complaint. From whom? We're not authorized to disclose that. He handed her several documents. The damage inside the property presents a possible safety hazard. Maya slowly read the notice. If repairs aren't completed within 72 hours, the inspector continued quietly, the city may declare the residence temporarily uninhabitable. She looked up. The damage was caused by the police. The younger inspector lowered his voice. We know. Then why am I receiving this notice? Neither man answered. After several uncomfortable seconds, the older inspector spoke almost apologetically. We're only following instructions. As they walked back toward their truck, the younger inspector whispered so softly only Maya could hear. I'm sorry. She watched them leave. Another layer of pressure. Exactly as she expected. Across town, Mark Kane smiled as he read the inspection report. Good. His phone rang. The caller ID displayed Carter Development. It's done, Kane answered. Will she leave? She won't have much choice. We're running out of patience. So is she. The line disconnected. Meanwhile, Evan Ross entered Internal Affairs, carrying nothing but a notebook. He hadn't been summoned. He came voluntarily. An investigator greeted him. What can we do for you, Officer Ross? Evan hesitated. His heartbeat thundered inside his chest. If he spoke now, there would be no turning back. I have concerns about a search conducted yesterday. The investigator gestured toward a chair. Sit down. For nearly an hour, Evan carefully described everything he had witnessed. The destroyed cameras, the forced entry, the unnecessary property damage, the comments Kane had made. When he finished, the investigator folded his hands. Do you have evidence? Evan thought of the encrypted flash drive. He wasn't ready. Not yet. I can get it. The investigator nodded. When you do, come directly to me. As Evan left the office, he didn't notice another man standing at the end of the hallway. Jack Reed. He had quietly listened to enough of the conversation to understand one thing. Someone inside the department still had a conscience. That afternoon, Jack parked across from Magnolia Street once again. This time he approached Maya's house. She opened the door before he knocked. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jack smiled faintly. You always did know I was coming. Maya returned the smallest of smiles. You still walk too quietly. Jack's eyes wandered across the ruined living room. The broken shelves, the damaged walls, the boarded windows. His expression darkened. They really did all this. They were looking for something. And they found nothing. They found exactly what I wanted them to find. Jack glanced toward the breached safe room. So the real archive is still secure. She nodded. Jack exhaled slowly. I was hoping you'd say that. They walked into the kitchen where Maya poured 2 cups of coffee. Jack looked at her for a long moment. You could have called years ago. I promised myself I'd never pull you back into this life. And yet you activated legacy. I had no choice. Jack reached into his jacket and placed a sealed envelope on the table. The director signed these before I left Washington. Maya looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. I hoped I'd never see one of those again. It's authorization. For what? Jack's voice became serious. If local authorities cross the line. The Bureau is prepared to cross state lines, Before Maya could answer, Jack's secure phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed instantly. "What is it?" Maya asked. He looked directly at her. "Our people just confirmed something." "What?" "The search warrant." He paused. "It never came from a judge." Silence filled the room. Maya closed her eyes. "So they forged it." Jack nodded. "We've already started tracing the paperwork." At police headquarters, Kane was still celebrating what he believed was his victory. He had no idea that a federal document examiner had already begun analyzing the signature on the warrant. Nor did he know that Internal Affairs had quietly frozen every digital record connected to the operation, or that Evan Ross had finally made up his mind. Late that evening, Evan unlocked his desk drawer, removed the encrypted flash drive, and slipped it into his pocket. He stared at it for several long seconds. "This is bigger than my career," he whispered. Then he walked toward the parking lot. Across the city, black SUVs with federal license plates rolled silently off the interstate under the cover of darkness. No emergency lights, no sirens, no announcements. Only a quiet convoy moving with purpose. Inside the lead vehicle, one agent looked toward the Atlanta skyline. ETA. 22 minutes. Another agent closed a classified case file bearing one familiar name, Maya Cole. The operation that Mark Kane believed he controlled was no longer his. Atlanta Police Headquarters buzzed with unusual excitement the next morning. Lieutenant Mark Kane stood behind a podium decorated with the department's seal. Television cameras filled the briefing room, and reporters lined every aisle. He adjusted his tie before smiling confidently. "Good morning. Today's briefing will address the misinformation surrounding our recent search operation." Flashes exploded across the room. Kane welcomed them. He had spent years mastering public appearances. "Our officers acted professionally," he declared. "Then every action taken at the residence of Maya Cole was fully authorized by law." A reporter immediately stood. "If everything was lawful, Lieutenant, why hasn't Mrs. Cole been charged with any crime?" "The investigation remains active." "So you searched an entire home, destroyed property, and still have no charges?" Kane's smile tightened. "I won't discuss operational details." Another reporter raised her hand. "Is it true your officers forced entry into a reinforced safe room?" "It was necessary." "Necessary for what?" "To preserve public safety." Before another question could be asked, the rear doors of the briefing room slowly opened. Every camera instinctively turned. 6 men and women in dark business suits entered without saying a word. None wore police uniforms. Each carried a black case. The room fell noticeably quieter. Kane frowned. "This briefing is restricted." The lead visitor calmly produced a leather credential. "I don't believe it is." He held the identification up just long enough for Kane to recognize the familiar gold shield. Federal Bureau of Investigation. A murmur spread through the reporters. Kane forced a laugh. "I wasn't informed the Bureau would be attending." "You weren't supposed to be." The lead agent placed a sealed evidence case on the front table. We're here because this investigation has changed jurisdiction." Silence. One reporter whispered, "What just happened?" The agent ignored the room. "Lieutenant Kane, before you continue your statement, we'd like to present several items that were omitted from yesterday's narrative." Kane crossed his arms. "Under whose authority?" a calm voice answered from behind the agents. "Mine." Everyone turned. Jack Reed walked into the briefing room. Though dressed in a simple dark suit, his confidence immediately commanded attention. Several veteran reporters recognized him. One quietly gasped. "That's Jack Reed," another whispered. He used to lead federal public corruption cases. Jack nodded politely toward the press before placing a small encrypted drive onto the podium. This contains synchronized footage from Officer Evan Ross's body camera. Kane's expression changed. What? Jack continued. It also contains timestamps matching independent surveillance recovered from the residence. Kane interrupted. That's impossible. No. Jack looked directly into his eyes. It isn't. The room's large projection screen suddenly came to life. The first video showed officers entering Maya's home. There was no resistance, no threat, no violence from the homeowner. Then came the push. Every reporter watched as Kane shoved Maya backward without provocation. The room erupted. Play it again. Freeze that frame. Camera shutters fired non-stop. Kane stepped toward the screen. This footage is incomplete. Jack pressed a remote. It continues. The next sequence showed Kane ripping the home's security camera from the wall before crushing it beneath his boot. Gasps echoed across the room. One journalist spoke aloud. He destroyed the evidence himself. Jack remained calm. We thought you might say the home cameras were unavailable. Another click. A second video appeared, different angle, higher resolution. The safe room. Every blow of the sledgehammer. Every command. Every insult. Every object destroyed. The reporters stared in stunned silence. Kane slowly turned toward the screen. Where did that camera come from? Jack answered. Not all security systems are visible. A third recording began. Audio only, crystal clear. Kane's own voice echoed through the speakers. Nobody is going to believe a quiet black woman over 6 police officers. The room became absolutely silent. Even the television crews stopped moving. Jack looked toward the audience. We've confirmed this recording through independent forensic analysis. Kane's face drained of color. One reporter stood. Lieutenant, did you say those words? He remained silent. Another reporter shouted, Did you knowingly authorize destruction of private property? No answer. Then a woman from the front row asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Where is Maya Cole now? The rear doors opened once again. Maya quietly entered the briefing room. She wore a simple navy blazer. No jewelry except her wedding ring. No expression of anger. No desire for revenge. The entire room turned toward her. Reporters immediately surrounded the aisle with cameras. Yet she walked slowly, never taking her eyes off Kane. He stared back. For the first time since meeting her. He looked uncertain. Jack pulled out a chair beside him. Please. Maya remained standing. I'm not here to make a speech. Sit. She looked around the room. I'm here because every homeowner deserves to know that no badge gives anyone permission to destroy a life. The reporters scribbled furiously. Then Jack opened another evidence folder. We're not finished. He removed several enlarged documents. The warrant used during the search. A forensic examiner stepped forward. Our laboratory completed its preliminary examination at 5:30 this morning. He projected 2 signatures onto the large screen. One authentic, one from Kane's warrant. The signature on the search warrant does not match the issuing judge. The examiner paused. It is a forgery! An audible gasp swept through the room. Reporters immediately rushed toward the exits to file breaking news. Television producers shouted into headsets. Go live. We're interrupting programming. Kane instinctively stepped backward. This is a mistake. Jack calmly closed the evidence folder. No. He looked directly at Kane. This is only the beginning. Outside police headquarters, more black SUVs quietly pulled into the parking area. Additional federal agents stepped out. Their arrival wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Inside the building, every officer who had participated in the raid began receiving the same unexpected message on their department phones. Remain where you are. Do not leave the building. Across the room, Maya watched the realization slowly settle across Mark Kane's face. For the first time, the man who had laughed while destroying her home understood something she had known from the very beginning. The safe room had never been the real trap. He was. For nearly 10 seconds, no one inside the briefing room spoke. The silence was heavier than any accusation. Lieutenant Mark Kane glanced toward the exit, only to find 2 FBI agents quietly standing beside the doors. They weren't pointing weapons. They weren't shouting commands. They were simply waiting. Jack Reed stepped forward and addressed the room. Until this morning, this investigation concerned possible police misconduct. He paused, allowing every camera to focus on him. It no longer does. The reporters leaned closer. It now concerns forged judicial documents, destruction of evidence, abuse of authority, conspiracy to deprive a citizen of constitutional rights, and possible cooperation between public officials and private financial interests. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Every television station switched to live coverage. Jack looked toward Maya. I believe it's time. Maya nodded once. For years, she had avoided this moment. She stepped beside the podium, placing an old leather credential wallet on its polished surface. The room fell silent again. Slowly, she opened it. Inside rested a weathered gold badge. Though worn by time, the engraved words remained unmistakably clear. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Maya Cole. Dozens of camera shutters erupted simultaneously. One reporter whispered, "My God." Jack continued. For 22 years, Special Agent Maya Cole served in the FBI's Public Corruption Task Force. Large monitors behind them illuminated with photographs from Maya's career. One image showed her escorting a notorious county sheriff into federal court. Another captured the dismantling of a multi-million-dollar bribery network. Then another, and another. Corrupt judges, deputies, public officials, organized crime associates. Each operation carried the same conclusion: federal convictions, recovered public funds, communities rebuilt. Jack looked around the room. During her career, Special Agent Cole helped dismantle 14 public corruption organizations operating across the southeastern United States. A veteran journalist slowly lowered his notebook. I covered some of those cases. Jack nodded. You did. The reporter stared at Maya. You disappeared after the Harrison investigation. I retired. Maya answered quietly. You vanished. I wanted a normal life. Another reporter raised her hand. Then why keep a safe room? Maya looked toward the cameras. Because people don't always forget the officers and criminals who expose them. She continued calmly. My husband insisted we build it after repeated threats following one of my final investigations. A photograph appeared on the screen. Maya and Daniel stood smiling beside a newly finished home. He believed we deserved one place in the world where we could finally feel safe. Her voice softened. How he never imagined the danger would one day come wearing police uniforms. The room became completely still. Even Kane lowered his eyes. Jack pressed another button. A digital timeline appeared. This is where the story changes. The first image displayed the forged warrant. The second showed metadata proving it had been created on a private computer, not inside the courthouse. The third revealed email exchanges recovered through federal warrants. Carter Development. An attorney, a city consultant. Finally. Lieutenant Mark Kane. Gasps filled the room. Jack continued. The forged warrant was created 43 hours before the search. Another document appeared. Bank transfers, consulting payments, anonymous shell companies. One highlighted transfer totaled $185,000. The recipient, a company secretly controlled by Mark Kane's brother-in-law. Kane's face turned pale. "That's circumstantial." Jack calmly answered, "It was." He pressed another button. A recorded phone conversation echoed through the speakers. Kane's unmistakable voice filled the room. "Get her out of that house. I don't care what it costs." Another voice responded. The developer already wired the first payment. The recording ended. Silence. Absolute silence. Jack folded his hands. Our audio laboratory authenticated every voice. Your reporters nearly shouted over one another. "Lieutenant Kane, do you deny this recording? Did you accept money? Were other officers involved?" Kane opened his mouth. Nothing came out. At that moment, Internal Affairs investigators entered the briefing room. Their commander walked directly toward Kane. Without raising his voice, he spoke. "Lieutenant Mark Kane, your law enforcement authority is suspended effective immediately." He extended his hand. "Your badge." Kane hesitated. "You can't do this here." "I can." The commander waited. "So can the Bureau." Heike, every camera zoomed in, slowly, almost mechanically. Kane unclipped his badge. The same badge he had used to intimidate innocent people. The same badge he believed placed him above the law. He placed it into the commander's hand. No one applauded. Justice didn't need applause. It needed witnesses. The commander continued. "Your service weapon." Kane surrendered it. Then came his identification. Finally, his department credentials. Each item landed on the table with a sound far louder than it. Across the room, several officers who had participated in the raid lowered their heads. Some looked ashamed. Others looked terrified. Jack turned toward them. "The Bureau has reviewed every recording." He looked directly at Evan Ross. "But we've also reviewed something else." Evan froze. "Courage." Jack gestured for him to come forward. Reluctantly, Evan stepped beside the podium. This officer preserved evidence when it could have disappeared. Jack placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. He honored the oath he took, not the fear someone tried to impose on him. The room erupted in applause. Evan looked overwhelmed. I only did what was right." Maya smiled gently. "That's exactly why it mattered." Then Jack addressed the room one final time. "This investigation isn't ending today." He looked toward the federal agents lining the walls. "It's expanding." Almost on cue, agents quietly escorted several city officials and Carter Development executives into the briefing room through a side entrance. Each wore handcuffs. Reporters gasped again. The corruption Maya had silently endured for days was no longer hidden inside one destroyed safe room. It had been exposed before the entire nation. And as Mark Kane watched federal agents lead away the very people who believed they were untouchable, he finally understood the truth Maya had tried to warn him about. Breaking into her home had never uncovered her greatest secret. It had uncovered his. 6 months later, Magnolia Street looked nothing like it had on the day Lieutenant Mark Kane ordered officers to tear through Maya Cole's home. The shattered windows had been replaced. Fresh white paint covered the repaired walls. New flowers bloomed beneath the front porch where police tape had once fluttered in the wind. Children rode bicycles down the quiet street again. Neighbors laughed from their front yards. Peace had finally returned. Inside the rebuilt home, Maya stood in the restored safe room. The heavy steel door had been repaired, but she had chosen to leave one long crack visible across the inside frame. A reminder, not of pain, but of survival. The shelves had been carefully reorganized. Family photographs, Daniel's military challenge coin, the American flag that had once been folded inside a display case, and beside them, the old FBI badge, no longer hidden, no longer something she felt obligated to bury. A knock came at the front door. Maya smiled before opening it. Evan Ross stood outside wearing a crisp new uniform. The silver lieutenant's bars had not yet found their place on his collar, but the badge he now wore represented something very different from the one Mark Kane had abused. "Morning, Miss Cole." She smiled warmly. "I told you months ago. You can call me Maya." Evan laughed. "I don't think that'll ever feel natural." He handed her a framed certificate. "The city asked me to deliver this personally." Maya read the inscription, "Citizen Award for Extraordinary Service to the Community and the Rule of Law." She looked back at Evan. "I didn't do this for an award." "I know." They insisted anyway. Behind Evan, nearly the entire neighborhood had gathered. Mrs. Henderson waved from across the lawn. Children held handmade signs reading, "Welcome home, Maya." The sight brought tears to Maya's eyes. Not because she felt honored, because she finally felt home again. Across downtown Atlanta, another crowd had gathered outside the federal courthouse. News cameras documented the final chapter of a case that had captured national attention. Former Lieutenant Mark Kane walked through the courthouse entrance, wearing a dark prison uniform instead of a police uniform. No badge, no weapon, no authority, only handcuffs. Federal prosecutors announced convictions for conspiracy civil rights violations, evidence tampering, forgery of judicial documents, bribery, and corruption. Multiple Carter Development executives received lengthy federal prison sentences. The company itself was dissolved under court order. Its remaining assets were redirected into neighborhood redevelopment funds, overseen by an independent community board. Several families who had nearly lost their homes were finally able to remain in the community. Justice had reached far beyond one arrest. Weeks later, Atlanta's police academy invited Maya to address a graduating class. She stood before nearly 200 new officers. None of them knew exactly what she planned to say. Maya looked across the room. "I've carried 2 badges in my life. She held up her retired FBI credential. "And I've spent years working alongside local police officers." She slowly lowered the badge. The badge itself never protected anyone. The auditorium became completely silent. The person wearing it did. She allowed those words to settle. "Power doesn't reveal your character. It reveals the character you already had." Several recruits quietly nodded. "You'll meet frightened people. You'll meet angry people. You'll meet people who don't trust you." She paused. "They still deserve dignity." She looked toward the front row. "If your authority depends on humiliating someone weaker than you, you've already failed." No one moved. No one looked away. The Constitution isn't just a document you swear to protect. It's a promise you make to complete strangers. When that promise is broken, every honest officer pays the price. The graduates rose together in a standing ovation. Among them stood Evan Ross. He applauded longer than anyone else. After the ceremony, Jack Reed met Maya outside beneath the shade of an old oak tree. "You handled retirement differently than most people." She smiled. "I don't think retirement ever handled me." Jack laughed. "Washington still asks about you." "I'm sure they do. They'd welcome you back." Maya looked toward the academy, where new officers continued taking photographs with their families. "I've already found my next assignment." Jack followed her gaze. the neighborhood, the future. He understood immediately. Some missions never required a badge, only purpose. As the sun began to set, Maya returned home. She walked through the restored safe room one final time before turning off the lights. Then she stopped. Her eyes rested on the cracked steel frame she had intentionally left unrepaired. Many people would have hidden the scar. She chose to keep it, because healing wasn't pretending the wound had never existed. Healing meant proving the wound no longer controlled you. She gently touched the steel. "You were right, Daniel." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. This house was never the safest place because of concrete. It was safe because we built it with integrity. Outside, neighbors laughed together as porch lights slowly illuminated Magnolia Street. A street once marked by fear had become a symbol of resilience. A home once violated had become a place where hope quietly lived again. And the woman many had dismissed as a lonely black widow had reminded an entire nation of a truth far greater than any courtroom verdict. That justice is never guaranteed by uniforms. It is protected by ordinary people who refuse to surrender their integrity. Sometimes that courage belongs to a retired agent. Sometimes it belongs to a young officer willing to preserve the truth. Sometimes it belongs to neighbors who choose compassion over silence. And sometimes it begins with one person who quietly says, no. No to intimidation. No to corruption. No to fear. Because history has shown again and again that the strongest walls are never built from steel. They are built from character. If this story leaves us with one lesson, let it be, this authority is temporary. Integrity is permanent. A badge can be taken away. Power can disappear overnight. Money can vanish. Titles can fade. But the choices we make when no one is watching become the legacy others remember long after we are gone. So never judge a person by the house they live in, the clothes they wear, the color of their skin, or the silence they choose to keep. You never know what battles they have survived, or what strength they carry behind a quiet smile. Thank you for staying until the end of Maya Cole's story. If this story reminded you that courage, honesty, and compassion still matter, share it with someone who believes that integrity is worth protecting. And remember, the greatest victories are not won by those who abuse power. They are won by those who refuse to surrender their principles.
Maya's story teaches us that real power does not come from a badge title or money. It comes from integrity. Never judge someone by appearance, skin color, or silence. Courage means protecting the truth, even when doing so is dangerous. Authority can disappear overnight, but character remains, and one honest decision can expose an entire system of corruption.